How are you? Most people answer that question with fine or good. But obviously it's not always fine, and it's usually not even that good. This is a podcast that asks people to be honest about their pain. To just be honest about how they really feel. About the hard parts of life. And guess what? It's complicated. I'm Nora McInerny. And this is terrible. Thanks for asking. What I have learned from making this show and from surviving my own grief is that in hard times, people can amaze you with their generosity or with their stinginess. Because some people have an unending well of compassion and love and kindness. And some people see compassion and empathy and kindness as non-renewable resources. Like there's a finite amount of empathy oil made from the decayed bones of sad dead dinosaurs, a certain ration you get to spend throughout your life. And if that's how you feel about it, you might also feel that it's only safe to spend that empathy oil made from the decayed bones of sad dead dinosaurs on grief and struggle and loss that feels neutral and understandable and safe. It can be hard to spend that ration on something random or nuanced or unexplainable. I have also learned that sometimes people are just jerks, even nice people who would otherwise be very lovely and kind. Let me give you an example. Every year, people trip and fall into the Grand Canyon and die. That is a resoundingly horrifying way to go. And on a Facebook post about a death where a man fell off the Grand Canyon skywalk while trying to take a selfie, something I do all the time, not the skywalk part, but just taking a photo of yourself, having the audacity to document your brief existence on this earth, there were 2 comments I read on this Facebook post. One man said simply, natural selection. Another woman said, do stupid stuff, win stupid prizes. Being an idiot should hurt. Yikes. I don't think these people, these commenters, would classify themselves as cold or rude or unempathetic. I do think that there are certain kinds of death, uncommon and unpredictable ones, that we hold at a distance because it's just too much to think that we or the people we love could go out that way. That could never be us. That could never be the people we love. And if we keep our noses upturned, if we laugh instead of grieve alongside the grieving, we will somehow be safe. And we can save that compassion ration for another day. Today's guest knows a lot about that sliding scale of empathy and compassion because she has seen it in motion and she has felt the effects herself. Feliz lost her sister Karina in February 2022, when Karina was just 28 years old.
She's the funniest one out of all of us. She is always making jokes. You always hear her before you see her because she's just loud. And she always had a smile on her face. If we were having like a family gathering or a party, she was the one who was making sure everybody was feeling included, trying to plan games, those kinds of things that me as the oldest sister, I was just like, we just all made it. I'm just glad we're here. She's the baby. So she kind of got away with things that maybe the rest of us didn't as much, but she also knew how to keep us all accountable. Like she would say, like, hey, are you really that mad about it? Like, are you really not going to talk to, Malaya, our other sister? Are you guys going to, you guys need to work it out. Like, stop being dumb. And she was very straight up about it. But she was the one who always brought the desserts. She, was always making all the fun stuff. She was like the fun aunt.
If Feliz were to tell you this while you sat next to one another on a train or in line at the store, you would feel awful. Awful that she lost her fun, vibrant sister. Awful that her kids lost the fun aunt. And you would only feel more awful as Feliz painted the full picture of who Karina was.
She was a server, and so she had the personality to be really successful at that. She fell into that really young, and so she just became really good at it. Like, she was training all the new servers. She was just really good at connecting with people and making people feel good and feel welcomed and feel like they belong there. And when she was pregnant with my niece, Aria, she tried to do like a 9-to-5 desk job. And she was like, this is not for me. Like, I am not, getting to know enough people. I'm not around and, bouncing around and having fun with people. Like, and she went back to her serving job. So that's just how she was, like very personable and wanting to get to know people. And so many people just had these stories of, when I was sad, Karina came and, she picked me up and we went and got coffee, or, she did these things for me when I was having a hard time, or she helped me move, or, she helped me with my babies, like all these things that I had never even heard before. And she was just everybody's like good friend. She had my nephew when she was 17. She had been through some shit, and she was finally in this place where she felt secure in, financially secure. She wasn't rich. But her and her boyfriend, they had good jobs. They, had a place that they loved. It felt like home to them. My sister, she had my nephew young, so she was very responsible going forward. And she waited and she planned things like to a T with that little girl. We didn't get to throw her baby shower. Like, we got to throw her baby shower, but she planned everything, like she was like, I'm going to wear this. I'm going to do this. Like, everything was to a T with this little girl. And I think it was in a sense because she didn't get to do that with my nephew. She finally felt like, I am a responsible mom. This is what I'm going to do. And I'm choosing this, So she reposted this meme. It says, dude, when I say I'm a strong ass bitch, I'm a strong ass bitch. I don't know how I'm getting through the shit I'm going through right now, but I am. And I'm surprising myself. Like, wow, mama really didn't raise a weak bitch. A sad one? Yes, but weak? Never. And so she reposted that and she said, there's been a few times I didn't think I'd make it through, but for once in my life, I'm so happy. I came out stronger each time. And that was less than a month before she passed away. And so, like, she was happy and she was so proud of herself. They planned a Friendsmas in 2021. And my sister is the kind of person who 9 days before, she can invite a bunch of people to her house and say, hey, we're going to do brunch. We're going to do mimosas. Bring your kids. We're going to have presents. We're going to have a white elephant. We're going to do this. Be there or I'm going to be upset with you. And people showed up like 5 days before Christmas. And she was the kind of person who could do that. And so she had this Friendsmas thing and she was giving a toast, just for fun. And she's like, 2021 sucked, but 2022 is going to be the best year ever. And, that was 2 months almost to the day before she passed away. And she was just so optimistic for what life was going to bring for her. And I get where my mom's coming from when she's like, why would she do this? Why would she do something so stupid? And I just always try to remind myself, like, she didn't think she was being stupid.
So that's Karina, a mother of two, a loving partner, a spoiled youngest sibling, and a cool aunt. An ace server who loved working in the restaurant industry and was always training the next generation of servers. But there's one thing that you don't know yet. One thing that could suck all the air and empathy out of the room. One thing that Feliz is careful to share when talking about Karina because, well, we know how people can be. Karina's death was headline news. And the headlines changed as more information came out about how Karina died. And as the headlines changed, so did people's reactions to Karina's death. But this is not breaking news. This is not news. This is the story of a family and a community who lost a light. Like everyone, Karina was much, much, much more than how she died. So before you get to know just how Karina died, you get to know who she was. Being able to share adulthood with your siblings can be such a cool thing. You saw each other in your most vulnerable stages of development growing up through taunting and teasing, or maybe ignoring, potential physical violence over a remote control. Some siblings grow apart as they grow up. But despite their age gap, Feliz and Karina grew towards one another.
So I have 3 siblings with my mom, and my older brother has his dad. I have my dad, and then my 2 younger sisters have their dad. So it's like all over the place. And there's a big age gap between all of us. My older brother is 8 years older than me, and then I'm 10 and 11 years older than my sisters. As we grew older, my brother moved. His kids were older. He got to move and be all over the place a lot sooner than any of us. But me and my sisters started to be really close because they're 22 months apart. So they're like this. They slept in the same bed until they were like 16 years old. But we were always really close. I watched them, when I was old enough to do that. I was their babysitter. I was their, nagging older sister. I was the one in college who would bring them, when they were like in middle school up to visit the campus where I went and stuff like that. They started seeing me less as like the nagging older sister when we got older. And I think that really, because Karina and I have the biggest gap, because she's 93 and I'm 82. So 11 and a half years is what we are apart. And when she got pregnant with her daughter, or right before that, is when she stopped feeling like so young, like little sister, she was more like, okay, like we had the kind of relationship where she would be like, oh my God, like I got an update. My credit score went up. Look, it's up to this point now. And she was just like finally like growing up. You know what I mean? And we were finally just getting to that like grown up stage of siblings where we're all sharing what like adult life is like,
You hardly ever know when you are in the last moment of your life as you know it. But once that moment has passed, once you've crossed that invisible portal from your normal life into the alternate universe, even the most mundane details can stand out to you. And on February 19th, 2022, Feliz had the last moments of her life as Karina's big sister.
She had just gone back to work. My niece was 4 months old. And so I was watching her that night, that Friday night, and she was doing a shift where she was training to run the bar, or else she probably wouldn't have had a night shift because the baby was so young. But there was a woman who was going to be going on maternity leave in the summer. And so they were training her to run the bar and close down the bar and everything. And so I was watching my niece, and she came over, ended up getting to my house like probably 11:30, close to midnight, to pick the baby up. And she sat on my floor in my living room, and my oldest daughter was still awake, and my youngest was asleep. And my oldest daughter was just holding the baby, and we were just talking. And her boyfriend, Sam, he worked overnight, so he called her on his lunch break. She was sitting on the floor with my dog, the yapper. And she's like, oh, Sam, I want a dog. And they lived on a 3rd floor of an apartment building. And he's like, you're not going to take that dog out. And she's like, but you love me, so you'll take the dog out. And they were just joking around, and, we were just talking about all these different things. She was talking about her son and how he had gotten in trouble at school the week before, and how he was with his dad. And she was always bugging me because she wanted another baby. She wanted one more to be done. And she was like, you have to get pregnant with me. And I'm like, I don't really want to. I was almost 40 years old. I don't want another baby. And she's like, you can do it. Eventually, she was tired. The baby had woken up because, obviously her mom was there. And so she was like, okay, I got to get her home. She's like, all right, I got to go. Love you. And she left. that night, as soon as she got home, I asked her, let me know you made it home safe. And the baby was still awake. And she was just so excited to see her mom. And so they stayed up for a little bit. And she's like, I don't mind. Sam will be off work a little later. So I probably wouldn't go to sleep anyway. And so we were just talking about all these different things before we went to sleep. We talked like throughout the day on that Saturday. Her boyfriend didn't work on weekends, and that was like their time together. I talked to her here and there throughout the day, but not a lot. And that was it. It was just very normal. It wasn't like all right, love you, see you later.
Those were the last words Feliz would hear from her sister. Love you, bye. Feliz goes to bed. Karina goes home. She has plans with her boyfriend Sam and Sam's sister Cora. It's Saturday night. When did you realize that something was wrong?
So she and my sister Malaya, they have babies who are 4 months apart. They were always at night, when they would be up feeding, they would talk, they would text each other. And so they were constantly in contact with each other. They were constantly with each other. And so Malaya hadn't heard from her overnight. And she figured, she knew that she had gone out to dinner with her boyfriend and some of his family, and that maybe they were going to go have drinks after or whatever. She knew they had plans. So she was like, okay, maybe they're sleeping it off, whatever. So my mom and my sister lived in a townhome community. They lived a building away from each other. And so my sister had gone to my mom's house and was just like, hey, have you talked to Karina? And my mom was like, no, I tried to text her to see if she wanted these shirts that I have or something. And I didn't hear back from her. So she calls me and she's like, hey, have you talked to Karina? And I said, no, and I was deep cleaning my house that day, and I had just found this pack of onesies. And I was like, hey, do you want these? Like, they're just the right size for the baby, whatever. So I looked back at the message where I had sent her about the onesies, and I saw that it hadn't been delivered. And I was like, well, that's weird. It's already like 2:00 in the afternoon. She would be up by now. And so my sister just got that like spidey sense, and she was like, something's wrong. I'm going to call Cora.
Forget Liam Neeson. Forget Jason Bourne. If you have older sisters, they will find you faster than anyone on earth. Malaya calls Cora. No answer. She calls Sam, who she always calls when Karina doesn't answer because he will. No answer. She checks Facebook. Cora and Karina have both been inactive for the same amount of time, 13 hours. Again, this is something only a sister would notice.
And she just thought it was weird. Like, they were together, and then, like, are they sleeping? Like, what is going on?
So Malaya calls the last person she can think of. Sam's mom, Sue, who had been watching Karina and Sam's baby on Saturday night along with Cora's kids. Cora's kids are having a sleepover with Sue, but Karina's baby is still a baby, and she's not doing sleepovers yet. Sue would have seen Karina on Saturday night. Sue would know what was going on.
And the video turns on, and Sue is just freaking out, like crying, freaking out. And she's like, they're all on the floor. I don't know what's wrong. They're blue. Like, I'm freaking out. And so my sister is like, what? And so she tells my mom, and her and my mom get in the car, and they start driving over to my sister's apartment. And they called me, and I was like, we got to go. We start driving, and I'm like, they're fine. They're fine. They're totally okay. And, they're good. They're fine. And the whole way there, I was saying it. It's a straight shot pretty much from where my townhouse was to where Karina's apartment was. We're both right off of this like major street. And so it's about 15 minutes away. And the whole time I'm just like panicking, like freaking out. And then I would like come to the realization that my 6-year-old is in the back seat. And I'm like, sorry, baby, I'm not trying to freak you out. Mommy's just scared. Like, I'm just really worried. And like, I would go from like screaming and like freaking out and like not being able to sit still in my seat to trying to console my 5-year-old and saying like, hey, I'm sorry. Like, look, I'm smiling. And it was probably totally delusional for me to do that. And my boyfriend is just like, it's going to be okay. We're going to get there. We're going to get there. It felt like the longest ride of my life. And we turned off the main street to where their apartments were. And as you're coming over like the hill before you turn in, you can just see fire trucks, ambulance, police cars, like everything. And I was just like, move, get there now, like hurry up. And so he turns in and he hadn't even stopped the car. And I was like opening the door, running out of the car. And I saw a woman when I very first walked out, and she's like, they're all dead. They're all dead. And I was like, who the hell are you? Like, what is going on? So I go to find my mom and my sister, and I'm like, who's that woman? Like, what's going on? And my sister is just like shaking. She can't speak. She can't talk. And my mom is like, mom calm, like trying to, keep things level, but also trying to figure out what's going on. She had just gone to the ambulance because right before I got there, Cora, who's the sister, Sam's sister, she lived. They had just taken her away, and they had taken the baby because the baby was home with them. And they take him in the ambulance. And my mom went to go see the baby at the ambulance, and the baby like lit up. She knew my mom. And so my mom was like, they just took the baby. They're going to the hospital. We're trying to figure out what's going on upstairs. And I'm like, okay, it's fine. And there's just cops everywhere. And, obviously the people from the apartments are all coming out trying to figure out what's going on. And I remember asking one of the officers, I was like, hey, can I go up there? Like, that's my sister. That's my baby sister. I got to go up there. And he's like, you do not want to go up there. And I'm like, okay. And I remember just everybody like yelling and demanding of the detective who showed up. And I remember thinking, like, maybe if I go up to him and ask him really nicely, and so I went up to him like, hey, I know everyone's really yelling at you. I'm really sorry. I'm just really worried. And can you just, are you sure that my sister is not okay? And he's like, nobody in that apartment is alive, and you do not want to go up there. I can't let you go up there.
It's chaos. Feliz doesn't know who was in that apartment, but the officer is saying that everyone in that apartment is dead. 5 people. Everyone. But who's everyone? Karina, Sam, the baby? Nobody knows. And nobody knows why. Maybe carbon monoxide? The officer is wrong about some of it. 5 people are dead, and Karina and Sam are 2 of them. But Sam's sister Cora is alive and on the way to the hospital. And so is Karina and Sam's baby. And when I realized the kids weren't there, obviously that was a sense of relief, but also like my sister and her boyfriend, they're gone. Like, what do I do? So we sat around the parking lot just trying to figure out what's going on. And news crews started showing up right away because it was a huge call. 5 people dead in an apartment. Like, what is going on, And I remember asking the detective, like, hey, can you make them like back up? Our family's here. We're just trying to figure out what's going on. Can you make them back up? And he was like, I can't make them go any further than the police tape. By this time, it was around 4 or 5 o'clock, and news was coming on, and it was live. And so, there we are on the news, from a distance, but they're showing us, and, people start calling us like, hey, we saw you. That was you, right? And my mom started calling people, calling friends of hers or like close family members and just saying like, hey, my baby's gone. I need help. We asked the victims' advocates to take my mom and I to the hospital to be with the baby. And they put us in a car and they were going to drive us there. And then all of a sudden they just wouldn't move. And my mom was freaking out. She's like, you got to go. Like, we got to go to the hospital. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. And she kept talking to people on her radio, stepping out and talking to people in the car. My mom's like, I'm getting out of this car. And I'm very much a rule follower. I'm like, she said she's going to take us. We're not in a state to drive. We need to stay here. Like, that's it. And it's so silly now thinking back. Like, if there's one time in your life when you can not follow rules, it's in a time like this when you don't have any information. So I convinced my mom to stay in the car, and they ended up taking us to the police station where they had made it as kind of like a meeting place for our family to get away from the cameras and everything. And it was a holiday weekend. It was President's Day weekend. It was a Sunday night, and that building, it was more like the civic center, like where the detectives and the court and everything, there wasn't like a full police presence there, and it was empty. And so it's just my family. Sam's family had gone to the hospital to be with Cora, and the other families didn't know anything yet. They were still trying to ID the other 3 people. So it was my family in this closed down police station. It's like haunted. It feels haunted because it's just, completely empty. They went and they found like
her Facebook was pretty locked down. I remember my brother calling while we were at the police station. He was in Florida, and he was like, you need to get her phone and you need to lock down any of her social media. This is going to be a big story and people are going to find it. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, why are you even talking about her phone? Like, our sister just died. What are you talking about? Like, I remember being pissed off at him. And then later, like, oh, you had a point. But they went and like silly random memes that were public on her Facebook. I remember just like shaking. And I think that, I don't know if it's like the woman in me or whatever. I was like, okay, if I'm not super emotional, I need to turn that off for right now. I need to just talk level with these people. I'm not going to get any answers if I'm just being the crazy emotional, which is insane, obviously, right? Like my sister and 4 other people are dead, 100 feet away from me. But I'm like, okay, turn off the emotions. Let's be business. I'm the one in my family who handles things like this. Like, I'm the oldest daughter. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go be the representative. I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to just be strong and I'm going to, do all these things. But I remember just feeling like shaking inside.
C.S. Lewis wrote, "No one ever told me that grief felt so much like fear." Feliz and her family are feeling grief and fear because it's terrifying not to know how your sister and her boyfriend died, and because it's terrifying to learn how. Karina and Sam and Cora and 2 of their friends had a little party on Saturday night. Just a few friends hanging out at Karina and Sam's apartment after they put the baby to bed. Someone, and we'll never know who, brought cocaine. And in the perceived safety of their home, surrounded by safe people, they all took it. They all took it. And 5 of them died. And there, right there, is where the empathy ran out and the headlines and comments ran wild.
It's easy to see things and make quick judgments because we see a million pieces of media, whatever, every day. And so it's easy to say, oh, why would you do that? Or why would you think that that's okay? And, I took a step back several times and I was like, okay, if I saw a story where a 4-month-old baby was there, and, there was a news story, it was done by like Daily Mail. They would say like it was this drug-fueled party where a baby was left orphaned and just all these crazy things, right? Like these parents were known to party and they were, it was drug-fueled and they, didn't care that there was a 4-month-old baby in the room. They left orphans and blah, blah, blah. Like it was horrible. And they took pictures of my niece, took pictures of my nephew, and she was 4 months old. My nephew was 10 years old. And that was one thing I was upset about. I was like, these kids have no say-so. They're not giving any consent and they don't have the ability to do so. And it's gross and skeezy to include their faces in this story that's become an international story. They have the right to that privacy regardless of what their parents did. Like it's so gross. And I had known my sister had like dabbled in that here and there before, but I didn't know that was something that she had done since she had the baby. She had recently stopped nursing, and so I know that she had some drinks, and I live in Colorado, so marijuana's legal. Like they had, smoked here and there. I knew that she had done it once or twice when she was younger, and that was it. And for me, it just didn't make sense. I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, yeah, there was like a mirror out and it was coke.
But it wasn't coke. Not even a little bit. This little gathering of friends became, at the time, the largest fentanyl poisoning in our country's history.
They have, it's called a spectrometer, I think is what it's called, where they can test drugs. And it came up as, I won't tell you the breakdown, but it'll tell you like it's cocaine and something else. And it just came up pure fentanyl. They had no idea that what they had was pure fentanyl. They thought they were just gonna, do a line of coke, have a night at home where they're safe in their own home and hang out with their friends and then go to bed. And they had no idea. The police officer said that they probably didn't even, because of the strength of it, they probably didn't even have a chance to realize what was happening They said it was probably within like minutes of when they did it that they were gone. Depending on how, like, what order they all did a line or whatever, they wouldn't have had a chance to call for help or anything like that.
Feliz has lost her sister. Karina's children have lost their mother. And hundreds more people have lost a version of Karina that held significance in their lives. The grief of Karina's death is a wave that only grows bigger as it heads towards shore. But there's something else that's growing bigger: the story of her death and the judgment around it.
You know, obviously it's a huge story. I don't fault them for that. It's a big thing that happened in our community. And like my mom saw her face on the screen and just was livid. Like I don't even know where she got the number for the newsroom, but she, within a few minutes, she was on the phone with like the newsroom at, you know, 2 different stations and was yelling at people. And she's like, "You don't have any permission. Take my daughter's picture down." And like, even people who would say things like, "I know some of the people who were there and they were known for this." And it's just like, who are you? Like, and I remember there was a minute where Malaya and I were like fighting anybody we could in any comment section we could, because I was livid. Like, that's my sister. And, you know, if there's anything that I know, like, I can say what I need to say about my sister to my sister, but no one will speak about my sister. It turned into this, you know, fighting strangers on the internet for a while.
Fighting strangers on the internet is a time-proven tactic to get through the anger of grief. Grief is compounded when you have to defend the honor of the person who died. That is a whole other task on top of grieving. We all want the people we loved and lost to be remembered, but we don't have any control over how they are remembered. When Karina's death becomes a media story, that biggest fentanyl poisoning ever in the country at the time, it's not just old colleagues and friends whose opinion Feliz has to hear about. It's everyone's. One article from the Daily Mail is titled, "4-month-old girl orphaned after her mom and dad took her to drug-fueled house party in Colorado where they died after taking, quote, fentanyl-laced cocaine." And this is some of the commentary that nameless, faceless strangers from around the world chose to leave on that article. The mother liked to get high. One can deduce that this community has a tolerance for drugs in general and very little education. I pray she finds new parents that value her life and their own and have no intention of destroying their chance of years of happiness. I pray this little girl lives a long and happy life with no remorse for her idiot biological parents. Parents more concerned with getting high than the love and safety for their children. The baby girl is too young to remember any of this, but her son will be forever scarred. Selfish B, @ money sign, TARDS. They didn't deserve children. The kids will be better off. And if you have ever left a comment like this, on a story like this or any other, it's not too late to delete it. It's not too late to consider that on the other side of the screen are people who have forgotten more about the person you're judging than you could ever know from a stupid article in the stupid Daily Mail.
So because the baby was there when they died, a caseworker from like human services, social services had to be involved from child protection, and just to make sure the baby was safe and that, you know, everything like that. And she told us, you know, you guys should be careful. She's like, "Have you Googled your sister's name? Have you Googled Sam's name?" And that's when I did. And I was like, oh my God, like someday these kids are going to see this. You know, they're going to have access to the internet and they're going to be able to see, you know, Karina Rodriguez, you know, drug fueled party, blah, 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 blah. And so that's when I kind of started to kind of go off the deep end and really start looking at everything that was coming up when you would Google their names. it was crazy because I have a very unique name. If you Google my name, it's like my jobs and like my Facebook profile. And I don't even share a last name with my sisters. But my phone was ringing off the hook. I would get probably 20 friend requests on Facebook a day. Just all these like random phone calls, text messages, messages on Facebook, messages on social media, people who just wanted to know, like it felt like people just wanted to be like witness to our family's pain. And going through the most traumatic event of your life is hard, obviously. But when you have like the eyes of the world speculating and picking apart every little thing they can see that's public of these people's lives, it was just another layer of just devastation. We can't even settle down and grieve. It was, going into protection mode, like big sister, you are not going to talk about my sister like that.
It's normal to be curious, but the internet has also given us an abnormal amount of access to things that are none of our business, and the ability to voice our often uninformed opinions about any and everything.
And it's hard because people say, well, they shouldn't have been doing that. No, they shouldn't have. But how many people do most of us know who have been to a party and someone, pulls that out? It used to be like a very like white collar drug. Like, you've seen The Wolf of Wall Street. You've seen like, these things where it's like the rich, more upper class people are the ones who are doing cocaine. And, I always tell people they shouldn't have been doing that, but we're supposed to be able to learn from our mistakes. We're not supposed to die, My mom always questions, like, how could she do something so stupid? How could she, do this? And I'm like, she was happy. When you're that happy, you don't think, hey, this next thing is going to kill me. Like you don't think that way. You think like, I'm having a good time with my friends. I'm at my house. My baby is in her bed. We're here. We're safe. And I'm going to just do something that I wouldn't normally do because life is good and I'm going to enjoy this time. In my mind, I was like, you know what? They probably thought we're doing the safest thing. We picked up our daughter. We hadn't had any drinks yet, so we're going to go home. We can have a couple drinks at home with her friends, and then a friend, shows up with this stuff, and fine, we'll try it. We're at home, like she is safe. We are safe. We're not going anywhere else tonight. And it didn't turn out that way. And it's not fair, it's never fair, but it feels like when she was really trying to be in this place. My sister, she was a young mom. She was having fun. She was 28 years old, with people she loved, and this never should have happened.
Feliz is butting up against the sliding scale of empathy of the strangers who encounter Karina's story and consider themselves experts in her life and death. Countless incendiary comments from strangers who either don't know the nuances of that story or don't care enough to withhold their judgment or haven't heard of simply scrolling by and writing their thoughts in a journal. Please, people, get a journal. And the thing about posting comments online is that you don't know who is seeing you. Because Feliz is seeing the hundreds of comments about Karina, and it makes her grieving family wonder who they're close to in real life that could be feeling the same way. And Feliz is not saying, you know what, everybody? Go do drugs. Go get some cocaine and do it. She's instead asking a more important question. Should you die from a mistake? And should you be judged for it forever?
That anger, had me up at night. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't do anything. And so I started just writing to people. I would find my state senator, state congressperson, national, everybody. I was just writing to everybody like, hey, why aren't you doing something about this? Why is this even a thing? And I ended up getting some responses, and that led me to groups that were like, hey, actually in Colorado right now, we are trying to pass a law to be more stringent and more strict on fentanyl laws. And so in April, not even 2 months after my sister was gone, my sister and I both testified to our state legislative committee about the law on fentanyl.
She was not a person who struggled with addiction, and she said in the week before her death that she was the happiest she had ever been. The night she died, she was with friends and family in her own home and had no intention of touching the fentanyl that took her life.
We did that twice, and then when the bill passed, they asked me to speak at the bill signing, so I spoke at that. And it just made me feel like, okay, if my sister's name and her story has to be out there and people have to know this, it made me want to have other good things tied to it. Granted, my sister, what happened to her will never, ever be okay. But in my mind, I was thinking about 10 years, 5 years from now, when the kids can Google their mom's name and they're going to see that, yes, she died and it was horrible and it never should have happened. I've heard of people who thought they have a joint and there's just marijuana and it ends up having fentanyl in it and they're gone. And there's just such a stigma around it. And most of these people are doing things that they had no idea had any fentanyl in them. And that makes it so sad for me because those people feel like they can't speak out and they can't talk about their loved one without any shame. And I just really feel like one decision, one moment, one night of their lives does not get to define everything for them. It really just makes me want to get out there and provide education on what else we can do and how we can prevent this. I have no judgment. People are going to do what they do. We've all done, our own things that maybe didn't align with our morals for the rest of our lives. But if you're going to use, be safe. There's ways to test it. There's ways to, use safely and to be aware that if you're around people, even if you're not using any kind of drugs, to know the signs that, hey, this person might be experiencing an overdose, a poisoning, whatever it is. Just the distinction between overdose and poisoning has been huge for me. Like, even there was a news station who was covering it and she tweeted something and I was like, hey, my sister was actually she didn't overdose. She was poisoned, because overdose is when you know what you're consuming and you do too much of it. My sister had no idea. It would be like her going to the bar and ordering a beer and getting like something with arsenic in it and totally not what she ordered. She was poisoned. And so just even making those distinctions and being able to talk about it in that way so that families feel okay to say, my child, my sister, my friend, my whoever, this doesn't define who they were. Obviously, we all have to process it, but I can't stay there, especially because my girls see that. And now I have this extra pressure of this girl who I love so much, who's not biologically mine, but she's mine. And I have to protect her from all these horrible things she's going to know later in her life.
What is it like to raise your sister's daughter?
It's hard. She's this amazing little person. Like, she's so smart, and all parents say that, but she is just, she's smart and she's insightful and she's funny, but she looks so much like my sister when she was little. Like, someone said, oh, Karina really just gave birth to herself, huh? Because she looks just like her. And there's days when I look at her and I'm just like, oh, you look so much like your mom. Or she'll do something that's funny or amazing, and I'm like, oh, I hope they're seeing this wherever they are. I hope they see this. I have a 7-year-old, and so Aria obviously hears her call me mom, and so she'll be like, my mom. And the first time she called me mom, I had to like walk out of my house and like get a hold of myself, because it was just, and it was very unexpected. She's like, hi, mommy. Because she calls me auntie, and, we show her pictures of her mom and dad every day, and she can pick them out. She's like, mommy, daddy, she talks about them all the time. And so, and I tell myself, like, she's 2. She doesn't know what these words mean. She just knows that I'm her safe adult, and my mom is one of her safe adults. My boyfriend is one of her safe adults. But it tears me apart, either when she does things that I wish they were here for, when big events come. Her birthday was last weekend, and I still bring this picture of them, put it on the table with the cake because they're here, and I stress my older sister. I stress myself out about the future and what that's going to look like. Like, Am I loving her enough to be able to get through this trauma that she doesn't even know she has yet? Am I loving her enough to make sure that she's gonna be okay? Am I doing too much? Like, am I making her this like piece of her parents and not letting her be herself? And thank God for my therapist, because she is like, you're loving her. And that's the important thing. Those things may come up later and you'll deal with them then. Future Feliz will take care of it. But right now, you are loving her. There's nights that I go to sleep and I'm just like, God, she really wanted me to have another baby. And here I am taking care of hers, and I make those jokes with her. I talk to her all the time. Yesterday, I was giving Arya a bath and this song came on and it just made me cry. It made me think of my sister. And she looked at me. She goes, "Why crying, Auntie? Miss Sister?" I just lost it. Like, how does she know? Obviously we talk about it enough and she picks up on things, but she's 2, like 2 in a week. How do you know these things? How do you know? But I feel like it's also that her parents are so ingrained in what we do that she knows. She knows those emotions. And, I just tell her, Auntie's sad. I miss my sister. I miss your mommy. And she's like, "Sister, my mommy?" Like she, her broken little 2-year-old, words. But yeah, so days like that are really hard. My sister's middle name was Joy, and she hated her middle name, but she gave it to her daughter. She was like, "I'm going to make it something new." And so I always tell my sister, when I have my little talks with her, like, "You made such a good choice. Like, this little girl is just pure joy." Like I said before, my sister was always telling me, have another baby with me. And I was done. Like, right now I have a college freshman and a second grader. And then I also have Arya. So it's like, I am starting over from the very beginning. But in my mind, there was no other choice. There's nothing I wouldn't do for my sister. And if that meant, changing everything in my life, selling the house that I had bought and buying a bigger house and making sure she had her own space and, having a space for her brother when he wants to be here to visit, that's what I was going to do. And so that's what we did. But it's always been my goal to make sure that she doesn't, without erasing them, doesn't feel the loss of them. I don't want it to feel like she has this huge hole in her life, which she does. They're not here. But I also want that hole that she has just to be filled with love instead of everything else that is out there. I always debate what is harder, that Arya doesn't have any of her own memories of her parents, or her brother Josiah, who has 10 years of memories of them and now doesn't have any more. And I don't know what's more sad to me. And I don't think there's a way to really answer that. They're both incredibly hard and heartbreaking and not fair.
There are very few fair deaths. You are lucky if you can say, "Someone I love died at the exact right time in the exact right way, and everyone involved was ready for it." And once you cross that threshold into the world without your loved one, time moves differently. You're counting the hours, and then the days, and eventually the years. But Feliz counts Sundays. Because even though it was Saturday night, technically, Karina died at 2 a.m. on Sunday morning.
I just go by Sundays. Like, it was the 86th Sunday yesterday that I haven't had her. And, even all this time later, I still can't drive down that street, the main street between my house and her house. I avoid it at all costs. I take like little journeys on it because it's a very main road in our town, but I still can't do it. It's just, I just get so many, like, my body knows. And, in the same way that my body knows it's Sunday, it's supposed to be a day of relaxing. It's supposed to be a day of all these things, laundry, whatever, your Sunday looks like. And for me, even though I do those things, like, I'm at the point where I get them done, but I always know that it was that day.
When we spoke to Feliz, she had lived without Karina for 86 Sundays. When this episode comes out, it will have been 99 Sundays. In 2022 alone, there were 200 deaths from fentanyl every day in the United States. That's over 73,000 people, a stadium full of lives, gone. And in their wake, countless people like Feliz and her family, counting the days since they've gone, Sunday by Sunday by Sunday. I'm Nora McInerny. This has been terrible. Thanks for asking. Thank you immensely to Feliz for reaching out to me with her story and for sharing her memories of Karina with our team. Karina's life and the lives of Sam, Stefan, Humberto, and Jennifer were taken from this world too soon. We are honored to be able to spread the light of their lives just a little bit further. Fentanyl, opioids, they're such huge topics. There are so many different ways that people have been affected by it. It is not unlikely that you have been or will be affected by it in some way. This is our first time talking about this on our show, but it certainly won't be the last. If you haven't yet, consider joining our Patreon community. We have bonus episodes twice a month, and we also do regular mailbags where we take your comments, your questions, and we talk about them as a team. You might also get invited to a table read for one of our shows where we go live in the middle of a workday. Feliz is actually in our Patreon, so she saw and heard this episode before it came out. We are an independent podcast. It has never been more important in this version of the podcast industry to have listener support. Special thanks to David Farr, Jamie Zimmerman, Lillian Campbell, and Rachel Humphrey for being supporting producers of this work. Supporting producers are Patreon members who support us at the very highest level, which is absolutely amazing. We've been making this show for over 7 years at this point, and I'm very grateful to continue to be able to do this. Terrible Thanks for Asking is an independent production of Feelings & Co., a little independent podcast production company, a little un-network of people who believe that your feelings matter. Our team is Marcel Malekebu, Megan Palmer, Claire McInerny, Michelle Plantan, and Grace Barry. Our theme music is by Joffrey Lamar Wilson.